first ever DestinAsian virtual roundtable webinar. To our audience, we have 100 of you joining us this afternoon. This is our first ever webinar. We're very excited to have this. Of course, in the last, I've been home for the last 8 weeks. Our world has pretty much changed overnight. Even though a lot of us are working from home, a lot of hotels are shut and people can't be out and about traveling. We realize, of course, that we still have to engage with our friends in the industry. Hence, we came up with this idea of doing a regularly virtual roundtable to get, to hear stories from our colleagues from around the region of how they're adapting and strategizing during this period, and also moving forward, the new norm, I suppose, post the pandemic. For us, of course, with DestinAsian, our mission 19 years ago when I launched the magazine, my idea, my dream was to showcase new destinations in Asia, because many international travel magazines don't write enough about Indonesia or Laos or Cambodia. They write mostly about destinations like China and Thailand and Japan. 19 years later, our mission, I guess, has changed still, of course, to highlight new destinations. But also now I think we've taken a more important role. We would like to take a more active role, I suppose, of how to revive the tourism industry in the region. That's what our goal is, to help all of you out there, I guess, to adapt and to move forward. And one thing I know the last 19 years, since we've been doing this magazine for 19 years this year, is that we're still around through a lot of support and partnership and collaboration with our partners over the years. And I think also moving forward, it's more important than ever that we support each other, collaborate and through partnership. That's how we can survive, I suppose, these challenging times. So, so we have a great lineup of panelists here this afternoon, joining us from Hong Kong, Jakarta, Bangkok, and one more from Singapore, where Rosalind is able to join us. Chris Hill, our editor-in-chief, who's supposed to moderate this panel, unfortunately has had problems joining us, so he will be joining us when he can. But we have also our deputy editor, James, here, who's going to take over that role of moderating the panelists. Before I leave this to James, I'd like to say thank you all for joining us. And again, hopefully this will be a regular session that we're going to have. We only launched this on Monday, and when we send the e-flyers to our friends in the industry about this roundtable, and by Tuesday we had a full house. So again, I'm very, very happy with the response. So thank you again. I'll leave this to you, James, to start our roundtable.
Okay, well, it's well past 2 o'clock, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm James Louis, Deputy Editor of DestinAsian magazine, and I'd like to thank you for joining us today. So the topic we'll be discussing in this very first webinar is the impact of the coronavirus outbreak on the travel industry, and in particular, its implications for the luxury hotel sector in the Asia-Pacific region. We'll work our way through 6 talking points over the next 45 minutes or so, after which we'll have about 10 minutes for a Q&A session that you can participate in using the chat function on the toolbar at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So please send in your questions and we'll get to as many as we can. And with that, let me briefly introduce today's esteemed panelists. We have Paul Hicks, founding partner and CEO of GHC Asia, a Hong Kong headquartered regional PR agency specializing in hospitality, travel, and tourism. Now joining us from Bangkok, we have Marion Walsh-Edouard, the Vice President of Public Relations and Communications at Minor Hotels, whose brand portfolio includes Anantara, Avani, Elawana, Oaks, and Tivoli. Based like me in Jakarta, we have Christopher Chung, who is the Area Director of Sales and Distribution for Indonesia at Marriott International. And I, again, am the Deputy Editor of DestinAsian magazine, which is a luxury travel bi-monthly that has been covering the Asia-Pacific region and beyond since 2001. Our publisher, Ronald Lim, has also joined us. So let me thank our panelists again for taking the time to be with us today. I'd also like to welcome our 100 or so viewers from the regional hotel industry who have joined us for the first in this series of DestinAsian virtual roundtables that will discuss how different segments of the travel trade are coping in these extraordinary times, as well as ways we can all adapt to the post-COVID landscape. Great to have you all with us. So to start off, Today's talk focuses on the hotel sector and what some leading brands are doing to prepare for better days ahead. I think we'd all agree that the travel and tourism industry is nothing if not resilient and has weathered numerous crises before. And even though we're facing unprecedented challenges in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, this too shall pass. But in the meantime, hotels need to cope with a collapse in occupancy even as they rethink their messaging and operational protocols for the time, hopefully not too far in the future, that travelers begin traveling again. So let me first jump into the first talking point. So while it's impossible to say when the pandemic will be beaten or when it will be safe to travel once more, it's clear that domestic travel will begin to rebound well before international travel. Regionally, we might even see bubbles of cross-border travel emerge among countries that have contained the disease, as is currently being discussed between Australia and New Zealand. So how is this reflected in hotel bookings or marketing strategies? Marian, perhaps you could start us off. Are Anantara and the other brands in your group planning for an early resurgence in domestic tourism? And if so, how will that play out in a place like Thailand, where so many of your properties are located?
Sure, good question. I think without a doubt that domestic travel will rebound before we see regional and international or global travel. And that's quite simply because of the lack of airlines flying in and out of the countries at the moment. So for sure, we and all of the other brands here in Thailand and in all the countries that we operate in, which is 56, are focusing on the domestic market. And it's a very, very simple and basic sequence. We're looking at staycations here in Bangkok. There's a lot of people who have been in lockdown for a number of weeks or nearly 2 months. And they just want to get out and be able to enjoy a little bit of freedom, but they don't want to stray too far from home. So we're looking at the staycations. We're looking at the drive destinations such as Hua Hin and Pattaya. We're looking at road trips anywhere from Bangkok to Hua Hin down to Phuket, and then focusing on our high-end products such as villas, private getaways, remote destinations within these locations so that we can couple a couple of different themes together. Here in Bangkok, I think today we'll send out a story about from Anantara Siam, a cut above the rest. And essentially, we're just trying to look at it a slightly different angle. It's a staycation in our city hotel, Anantara Siam, but we do have a Trefethen Hill barber shop also at that hotel, so we can guarantee a reservation for anyone who buys this package and stays at the hotel, because that's about the hottest commodity in Bangkok right now, getting a haircut. So that's going to be a fun one. And I think that's kind of the theme which I would like to express. I'm not sharing anything new with you when I say staycations, drive destinations. You all know this, but how do you do it a little bit differently, or add a little bit of lightheartedness, or create something, slightly different? And then as we move into the regional long haul markets, then we'll be looking at back to nature, wellness retreats, privacy buyouts, and remote destinations.
Thank you, Marian. I also want to ask about the specific situation in Bangkok right now, because I've heard that restaurants have reopened. So is that the case for hotels as well, or is that a different situation?
Most hotels are not yet open, but restaurants within hotels are open. And obviously there's a lot of restrictions and they're all being worked through at the moment. So we have reopened a number of our restaurants. We have limited amount of guests coming, but we are doing a lot, and we're seeing a lot of demand for private dining, private rooms, private entertainment. However, for those who prefer to have an alcoholic beverage with their meal, they are going to have to wait a little bit longer for that.
I see. Okay, thank you, Marian. Now let's turn our attention to Indonesia. So Christopher, I'd like to put you in the spotlight for a little bit. How are things looking for the Indonesian market from the perspective of Marriott?
All right, thank you for having me here, James and Roland and Chris. We thank the team. I see that we've got, and good afternoon to our friends of the industry and fellow hoteliers. So I think we obviously had the good news the last 2 days with the commercial flight starting up. strangely enough, in the last 2 weeks, we were busy looking at our portfolio within Indonesia, and we thought, okay, there's going to be very little travel. Then I think eventually after seeing that the people being at home for 3-4 weeks, they needed to just go and check in the hotel. So we had a few of our hotels in Bali that is doing fairly okay in certain conditions. Ubud is doing well for us. When I say well, does not mean that we are hitting full house, but you know, on some weekends they hit the 20% occupancy. So that was a surprise to us too. We were surprised to see that. But obviously, staycation remains very strong. Hopefully within the next few weeks, and we'll see, I guess it's a moving target too, that when the easing of restrictions starts, we do anticipate the travels within Java to intensify, you know, borders from Jakarta to places like Bandung and Surabaya and Jogja. I think that's when we start seeing it opening up. I think we see the same too with Malaysia this week, where some of hotels starts to get bookings, and they've just started the interstate traveling within today. So I think some of our regions we're seeing that easing off, and definitely to Marian's point, domestic is going to come first, and I think we are going to see a little bit later as far as opening up the international borders. We do depend on a lot of flights coming through to the island, for example, in Bali. So we are working very closely with the local authorities and the aviation companies and airlines to see when they're going to start that very soon. We do see that there is a large travel intent. I think we continue with our social engagement strategy, and given that the large urban population in all our key cities in Indonesia, we do anticipate that they are all looking forward to travel, although in a very controlled manner. But we do see that this will continue. And then as the international borders eases, then that's when we hope to really see the inbound travel and also outbound travel going into some of our wonderful destinations that we have.
All right, thank you very much for the detailed answer, Christopher. Now let's speak to Paul. Do you have any input from your hotel clients, Accor, Lux Collective, for instance, about the situation?
Sure. Well, obviously, you know, quite a lot of the hotels are still closed at the moment. You know, certainly the Lux Collective ones in Mauritius and Maldives. Some of the properties in China are obviously kind of opening up now, and I think China is a good place to look at, because you see how quickly, once the restrictions are removed, that people are traveling again. So for the May holiday that just passed, I was speaking to the GM of Capella Sanya, for example. He said they had very, very strong bookings for that holiday, and continuing right through the rest of the month. So definitely, I think as we're all saying, and I think it's common sense, domestic travel will certainly be the first to return. I know that hotels in Hong Kong as well, a lot of them are looking at staycations as being the first thing to focus on and to promote. So a lot of hotels and also some campaigns that are being sponsored by the Hong Kong Tourism Board are going to be looking at encouraging people in Hong Kong to explore their own destination for a change. So just whether that's just checking into a nice hotel for enjoying the weekend, whether it's going to different parts of Hong Kong which you haven't been before. So it's kind of common sense that the first focus is domestic, because really there's nowhere else to go. And then the next focus is the low-hanging, if you like, short-haul fruit. So, you know, things like we hear in Australia about the trans-Tasman bubble between Australia and New Zealand. That makes perfect sense. You have two destinations where the infections are largely under control. They can visit each other without too much fear of contamination. I suppose there's probably a kind of low-woo shuffle coming between Hong Kong and China, but that's a little bit more controversial. And I think people in Hong Kong are still worried about those borders coming down. There's also, of course, the political background, which was already impacted before COVID-19, and a sort of resulting reluctance from a lot of travelers from China to come back and save the Hong Kong tourism industry like they did the last time after SARS. So still a lot of questions to be answered there.
Right, thank you very much, Paul, for your detailed feedback. I've just been informed that Christopher Hill is in.
Yeah,
So
you should be able to see me.
All right. Um,
talk about an inglorious arrival. Apologies, apologies everyone for that. I've been having some computer issues.
No worries.
Chris is all yours.
Yeah, well, James, please continue. I'm
Okay,
still trying to
right.
call up some of this. Where are we right now?
Right, so
Sorry.
now we're ready to move on to the second topic, which is about enhanced cleaning protocols and safety and security. So for instance, Anantara has a Stay With a Peace of Mind program, and Marriott has launched a Global Cleanliness Council as well. So I'd like to ask our panelists, what will the new normal look like for these properties? Will physical distancing be applied to public spaces? And how will this impact the delivery of optimized service? Will we have to say goodbye to the treasured hotel buffet? What changes are ahead for the guest experience? So Marion, I'd like to start with you.
Look, I think we all know that there's going to be a lot of changes over the coming months. I mean, that's just completely undeniable at this point in time. I mean, you mentioned our Anantara Stay With Peace of Mind program. I mean, we issued that 2 weeks ago to be able to share and I guess comfort future guests to some degree. They need to feel at ease that they can come back to hotels, whether it's ours, whether it's other people, and that there's a certain levels of sanitation and what are people doing. So I think in the short term, yes, will we see changes? Absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, signing checks and things like that, people don't feel comfortable right now. But if your pen is sanitized, if all these things are done, it can add the level of comfort that is required. I mean, one of the things which we will be doing is obviously for Anantara, we have a council of people who are able to liaise with industry experts to come up with numerous ways to be able to make rooms cleaner, to be able to add technology to digitalize the process of check-in. For example, the car coming from the airport will be sanitized for guests' comfort. So we can do all of those things, but I think we also need to remember the human nature. We're in the hospitality business and we're all, you know, personality and charisma is part and parcel of what we do. And I think whilst we need to put these measures in place and whilst they are important, I think we should never ever lose sight within the hotel operation and the communications and everything that we do of guest contact, whether that may not be in the same format as it has been in recent decades. But I think that will also help hotels stand out as we move forward, that it's not all about the sanitation and hygiene. That's an important base that we need at every hotel, removing buffets, etc. But how do we actually, more importantly, maintain that human contact with our guests and be able to make those connections that we have in the past and that we need to continue to do for the survival of our business?
Marion. Chris, I'd like to ask for your feedback on this situation.
Great. So I think a couple of weeks ago, we announced that, slightly more than a month ago, we announced that we were going to set up the Marriott Global Cleanliness Council. And really, this council has been formed to develop the next level of global hospitality cleanliness standards. I think we work very closely with industry experts, as well as to some extent in some of our regions, we are working with the local health authorities. I think it's important that we are all aligned across all our regions. Obviously, the norms and the behavior would have changed. So really, we need to have, we need to address some of these health and safety challenges that is presented to us by the current environment. So with that in mind, we kind of then expanded it. This week, we've kind of, Arnie Sorensen launched a commitment to clean, which is following from what the announcement on the Cleanliness Council. And this is pretty much talking about our enhanced cleaning practices. And this is ongoing. It's not going to end here today. It's not going to end tomorrow. It's not going to end next month. I mean, the entire world is evolving. And I think as we see it, standards will change. Everything will be elevated. But at the same time, to Marion's point on us being a people-oriented industry, I think it's important that we still keep that with us and close to us. The new normal will be very different as we see it, and it will be an enhanced safety protocol. I think people are afraid, and definitely they want to be in a secure environment. So we need to provide that assurance. As far as in the luxury space, I think the personalization will not change. It will come in different form, I'm sure. And in fact, the attention will be much greater, and the anticipation of needs from our customers will be much more. And obviously, we have to elevate the deliveries, the deliverables. In the luxury space, we know that the devil is always in the details. So I think we can't avoid that, and we definitely have to move forward, right? And to your point, James, on the buffet, we Asians love the buffet. I'm not sure if it's gonna go go away altogether, but let's call it, if it's for today, let's call it, it's gonna be a buffet version 2.0. Well, I'm not sure how is that gonna look like, and I will lean on Paul to come with some great PR story around it at some point.
Well,
but definitely we will have to embrace the new hygiene protocol and incorporate the new service delivery in that space. But space will change, global design will change. Everything is going to change. Aesthetics will change. It might not look the same as it is. I'm sure there's a lot of safety enhancements that needs to put in place. But I do see that is going to that's going to happen. But I'm not sure when.
Thank you, Christopher. Actually, I would like to see if, Paul, if you have any insights on this. I mean, any of your clients, hotel clients in Hong Kong or in Greater China?
I mean, Accor, who we work with, I don't have a lot of information about this, but I know that they have a global partnership going with Bureau Veritas to sort of develop ultra-high health and safety standards. And I think this is something that we're going to see across the hotel groups, this need to make it very clear and to communicate that they have the highest standards of health and safety. And I think that probably the established hotel groups will gain from this current situation, in the sense that consumers will see that they're probably going to be safer, and they're probably going to gravitate more to the brands that they know and trust, rather than some things that they're not so sure about. That we've seen very much in the last decade or so, much more of a move towards the quirky and the independent accommodation. I think at least in the short term, we're probably going to see more of a return to people trusting the brands that they know have strong safety protocols behind them. But at the same time, I do think this will be short term, and I think that while in the immediate months when people start to travel again, they're going to be very wary about their safety, and they're going to be wary about exposing themselves to things. I think there will come a time when we all get very turned off by the idea of people putting temperature guns in our places and seeing everybody masked up in a restaurant. I think that once the threat is clearly over, people will not want to deal with that anymore, and they won't want to see that on a daily basis. And another thing I think will happen in the shorter term is that the more exclusive private experiences, where perhaps you don't have to have that. You're in a luxury private villa, you're just being looked after by a few staff there, and no one needs to wear masks, no one needs to be sanitizing every 5 minutes. I think that's probably what we're going to see an increase in demand for in the short term.
Thank you, Paul. So actually, my next question is related to what you just said. So I want to tackle the point of view of safety, security, and flexible cancellation policies. And are larger international chains likely to instill more confidence in future guests than small independent properties or home sharing platforms like Airbnb? And I'd like to ask Marian for your insights on this.
I would agree with Paul, actually. I think larger brands will benefit for the near future with regards to health and safety, because of the consistency, because of the budgets to be able to deliver standards, because of the ability to invest and work with industry experts, as we are, as Marriott is, as Accor is, and being able to roll out to a high standard programs. And that's not to say that smaller boutique hotels can't. It's just that level of trust, I think, and consistency that larger brands can do. And I think, for our brands, we're not a large company from the perspective of our brands. They're quite small, with 40 or 41 hotels, for example, for Anantara, 30 plus for Avani. So I think we're in a good spot in that, you know, we have the best of both worlds. So we have that ability to customize and perhaps curate for individual audiences, and be able to cater to people's needs and adapt and evolve as we see things changing over the coming months. And I think, again, to Paul's point, I think we will see that in the short term, people really need to see that those hygiene standards and levels. But as the comfort is reestablished in people's minds and they know that these things are done at hotel level, then I think people will start to relax and be able to, you know, enjoy it more without having to feel so nervous about what's going on. But again, from that perspective of having relatively small brands, we do have that ability to customize, but at the same time, we have the security and consistency that the larger brands also offer. And we do see, again, to Paul's point, that there's going to be a lot of demand for that luxury high-end private island buyout product, and that's something which we, on the, you know, health and safety side, which will be a great kind of sales angle in the short term. And we think road trips as well within the same brand can be something which would be very popular in the short term. For example, in the UAE, we have a number of hotels across Dubai and Abu Dhabi, so guests can just check into one company, one brand, so picked up from the airport, brought to the hotel, bags going to the next airport, could have the same driver over the entire period of time. So there's that extra comfort that there aren't 10 different people handling your bags, 10 different cars. It's all consistency and delivered within one brand, whether they're staying at our city property and then onto the desert or the island, whatever it may be. So we see lots of potential for that.
All right. Thank you, Marianne. I'd like to bring in Christopher. So to talk a little bit about flexible bookings and cancellation policies at Marriott, and I know that Marriott Bonvoy has extended its the dates where you can redeem points and so on. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we remain very nimble across all regions. I think one of the, I mean, we've been fortunate that we benefited from first of all our Greater China colleagues and so on. So from then we were able to formulate a strategy towards all our Bonvoy members and our customers and remain absolutely nimble and flexible across all segments and really cater to their needs. And most of them we see been rebooking their holidays at the end of the year or even. And I think it is the way to go. I think it's not just us. I think we'll find that across all our my colleagues in the other companies are also doing the same. Where in times like this, we'll just have to be absolutely flexible. We've been great that we were able to communicate very quickly. The speed to market and speed to customer was very quick, given the fact that data was readily available to us, and the engagement has been high. So we were able to communicate very quickly, and we see that our customers appreciate that. So yeah.
All right, thank you, Christopher.
And can I just make a comment?
So let's move on to our next.
On the flexibility.
Yes, please do, Paul.
I mean, from my experience, most of the hotel groups are very understanding about this. I think where a problem sometimes exists is when people through OTAs, and the OTA arrangement is inflexible and they can't do much about that. And I think that sometimes is perhaps wrongly reflected to those consumers as the hotel being inflexible, whereas it's actually, you know, to do with what was booked through an online travel agency. I think sometimes those still been a bit of a problem.
Okay, thank you, Paul. On to the next topic.
James, sorry, may I cut in at this point? I'm feeling a little left out of this conversation. My own fault, unfortunately. But let me shift it to the next talking point and give James a bit of a break. And this one's really PR related. So Marion and Paul, this will be over to you. And the question is, communications-wise, how has the crisis shaped your messaging, and how can hotels continue to inspire travel without without necessarily encouraging it in this current climate? And at what point will that shift? When will you shift gears, and when does the message start to be more in terms of please return now? Marion, perhaps?
Yeah, for the communications area, it has been obviously somewhat revolutionary in that, you know, we've completely changed the way we operate, but we haven't changed the core principles of public relations or communications. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, over the last 2 months, we have had to still maintain very authentic content. We've had to strike the right chord with our audiences. We had to be quick to get our messages out first, or as quickly as possible, and we had to be creative. So I think the core principles of what we do haven't changed. It was primarily the channels and the messages that we communicated which did. In March, we created, for example, for our Anantara brand, the Anantara Escapism campaign. And essentially we were focusing on 4 key themes, such as health and safety, you know, the tips for stay-at-home type of scenarios of juices and those type of things. We were looking at aspirational content of roundup of our best pools to make people dream. And we had stories from our people, our storyteller at the Anantara in Zambia, and perhaps my favorite one, which was the travel from home. We focused on things like our live feed from the elephant camp in the Golden Triangle in northern Thailand. And what I really loved about that one was completely unedited content. I think that's what people were looking for. They weren't looking for something that was over contrived or over edited. They were really looking for just something which, you know, they could just take in and embrace. But now we've seen the shift, to your point. I mean, there's definitely been a shift in the last week, 10 days, where people are now perhaps a little over all of that stay-at-home content because things are easing up in their country, and we're changing our themes to be able to now talk about what they could do in the future, such as back to nature, wellness and retreats. That's going to be really big, I think, in the coming months. We're launching 2 wellness facilities at our Anantara properties here in Bangkok, with more to come, and they will launch this year, because we really see, you know, immune boosting, preventative medicine being, it was already a real trend, but I think now even more so. And we've already talked about buyouts, private islands. There's going to be a lot of demand for that. People are looking for those stories. And I think remote destinations, and that touches on something Paul said earlier, you know, if they can get out into nature and really just take it all in, that's something they're, you know, that they would really enjoy reading about or seeing now. So that's the messaging that we're looking at in the, I guess you could call it a phase 2 of our Anantara Escapism campaign. But ultimately, authentic content, being quick to market, and you know, being creative in the stories.
Excellent. Sure. Good stuff. Paul, same from your side?
I wholeheartely agree. I think Marion hit the nail on the head there. We haven't rewritten any of the principles of PR and messaging here. It's exactly the same. It's making sure that your messaging is right for the situation. You know, you don't want to be sort of having your social media channels talking about special offer promotions and so on while everyone's sitting at home and knows that they can't go anywhere. It just makes you look very out of touch. So
right. So empathy is an important part of this. I think
it's a very important part of it. I think what we've seen quite a few hotels doing is trying to put some of the resources and skills that they have available to people as almost as a service. I mean, it's partly to kind of keep their name out there, but it's also done in, I think, in a genuine spirit of trying to use the resources that we have in order to give you some benefit while you have to stay at home. So things like, you know, Chiva Som or Six Senses offering kind of wellness classes from their practitioners, which you can log into in a Zoom environment like this, that kind of thing. I've also seen our clients, the Lux Collective, have launched some interesting Instagram festivals where they have Instagram live presentations from a variety of different inspirational people, which you can log into. And then I also saw from the Marina Bay Sands yesterday a huge package of different things that they're offering. So you can visit their virtual art science museum, you can have culinary skills classes from Gordon Ramsay, and you can sort of listen to the soundtracks from their nightclub on Spotify. So they're trying to bring their experience to you while you're at home. And I think that's a nice sort of trend that we've seen happening for right now. Obviously,
Right.
as we move into the next phase, and it's more about, you know, what can they do to entice you back without being too overly commercial about it.
Excellent. Well, it's good to see all this innovative thinking out there. And on that same topic, I'll just segue over to another question I had about an alliance of luxury heritage hotel brands in Hong Kong called Heritage Tourism Brands.
Yeah.
And Paul, I think you could probably tell us a bit more about the group. It involves legacy hotel brands such as Rosewood, Peninsula, I'm sure. Could you tell us a bit more about that, Paul? And then I'd like to quickly ask if that is indeed being effective, and is that something that other markets should be considering, those kind of alliances to help tourism rebound?
Sure. My understanding is that the initiative started from Peter Borer from the Peninsula Group, and then he spoke to the Wharf Group, and they expanded from there. Realized that they would have a stronger voice if they cooperated together. I think another important point to remember about this is it actually was not born out of COVID-19. It was born out of a response to the Hong Kong situation because of the protests, and it's kind of evolved into this as the situation has changed. So it was very much an initiative for the strong kind of Hong Kong owned and operated brands that have been around for a while to kind of pool their resources to see how they could reassure everyone that Hong Kong was still a great destination with a fantastic history and heritage that people should visit. But having said that, it is now morphing into a COVID-19 response. And I think that their first play is going to be very much sort of focus on, again, the domestic market as the first point of recovery, and then on the more sort of nearby local markets afterwards. I haven't actually seen the initiatives from them yet, but I know that they're working actively on them, and it's got various sort of video and content production aspects to it, and I think we'll be seeing more about that very soon. But certainly they're being taken seriously. They're working together with Cathay. They've got backing from the Hong Kong Tourist Board, and to me that sounds like quite a good sort of blueprint for other hotel groups elsewhere to follow, to kind of people who've got interests which ally, even though they might normally be competitors, which is essentially to bring people back to the destination. I think it makes a lot of sense in times like this to club their resources together.
Absolutely. I haven't heard of anything similar in other markets in the region. Has anyone else? Thailand, Bangkok has a few legacy properties that could band together.
No, I'm not aware that there's been legacy properties joining together. It's usually the tourism boards or the hotel groups. I mean, they're obviously behind the scenes. All of the major hotel companies here in Thailand are working together, but it's more, public-private partnership, working with governments on policies, etc. So it's more of the behind-the-scenes things which would be happening here in Bangkok at present.
Okay. One more question, and then we'll turn it over to the Q&A. Now, because I'm on my phone, I can't actually see any of the chat room or any of the questions that have come in. James, do you have a number?
Well, I do have one, so I can read.
Well, okay. Well, hang on to that. Hang on to that for now, then. Yeah. We can come back to that. So, last question. Much more general, and perhaps Christopher, you can tackle this one first, because I haven't heard from you for a few minutes. Within the region, and again, the Asia Pacific region is what we're trying to focus in on here. Do you have any thoughts as to which country or which countries are likely to recover fastest as inbound tourism destinations?
So over the past few weeks, and we've been tracking on a weekly basis. I mean, we've been fortunate that we benefited for all this, the information that we have. So Greater China definitely came in firsthand, and then what we see now is Korea and Japan slowly coming through. And I think within the Southeast Asian nation, with Indonesia with having a large population, I think inbound will continue, domestic will continue. But I think we also anticipate that the hubs will be opening up first. We need them too, Singapore, Hong Kong, Tokyo, Seoul,
Yes.
because, and once these hubs reopen, and I don't think it's, and then we'll see that then it's going to come through with the secondary hubs like Jakarta, KL, and I think Bangkok will be one of the first to open up. One of the hubs will be opening up very quickly. And with that in mind, then the onward travels and the access beyond these cities will happen. And places like Maldives and so on will definitely support from it. Our Bali properties will support from it, will benefit from it, and so on. I think we need those to open up very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Miriam, same idea?
Maldives is perhaps an interesting one. You know, I think regionally we can all say that, yeah, you know, Korea, Taiwan, China, etc., will all be, you know, ports of call for inbound in the short term. But if we talk about the Maldives, I think it's perhaps not necessarily which market is coming back, it's which segment of the market is coming back first. And the jet set crowd, I think we'll see the private jets coming in as soon as the Maldives opens up, and that will be obviously an area of business that everyone is hungry to see, because they have still the finances to do that. They have the ability to fly in private jets or rent private jets, and they feel comfortable taking over entire properties and being able to be at ease and not have to worry about health and sanitation and such things, or not to the same degree. So I think for the Maldives, we'll really see those that are still in a position to travel will be back really quite soon, and that's something, of course, which we look forward to.
Yeah, I mean, my notes have the Maldives down as the country worldwide that relies on tourism dollars more than any other nation.
Yes.
And it's also a nation that does not have much when it comes to a domestic market. So everything's pretty much inbound. So, and of course we love the Maldives and we love your properties there. So we'll hope for a return to business, and private jets might be the way to start that off. Paul, what about Lux? Lux has a couple of properties.
Yes, they do, and I'm sure they're going to be reopening soon. And I think obviously their first focus is probably going to be to court the China market, because well, first of all, they do have properties. They have the Tea Horse Road collection in China, which is the ancient sort of route to Tibet. These are beautiful boutique properties, and that they have reopened, and they also did very well in the last May holiday. But I would also look at this from the point of view of not just where the market itself is recovering, but also the source markets that they can rely on. And I think it's quite clear that we're not likely to be able to rely on Australian visitors probably for the rest of this year. Certainly not very likely to rely on a lot of visitors from Europe or the US. And probably most regimes wouldn't want them at the moment. So I think it really, for any meaningful recovery, it's kind of got to be where do the Chinese want to go in the region? And the research on that seems to suggest that Thailand is top of their list for where they want to go at the moment. I think just because Thailand has been popular with Chinese generally, but it also kind of fits in terms of it's not too far away, it's not too expensive, it's kind of a little bit familiar, so it's probably going to be a great return destination for them. And the second that comes up is Vietnam, and I think that again Vietnam has contained the situation pretty well, and I think they're quite well placed to benefit from the China invasion as well.
Right. So I guess safe to say you're bullish on inter-regional travel then.
I think it's got to be inter-region. I don't see that the long haul is going to be able to help us for quite a while.
Okay, that's fine. Good. Okay. Well, we're running out of time. James, perhaps the first question from the chat room.
Okay, so we have a question from Christopher Barnes, who represents Amex. His question for the panel is that given the majority of hotels have been forced to close, Are many thinking of using this time to do renovations of their properties, or is this impossible with government restrictions only permitting essential work?
Interesting question, Christopher. Thanks. Mariam?
Well, it's kind of a combination of both of those. Yes, there are restrictions. And of course, every hotel group will tell you that the health and safety of their people is the primary focus. And we cannot and will not be in a position where we would put anyone in a position of danger or something like that. However, yes, of course, the hotels are using this opportunity to not just renovate, but upscale, add new technology, or whatever it might be, where they can. I saw a video from our Anantara Chiang Mai property where a number of staff were painting and cleaning, and they made a picnic out of it. They had a nice day. So yes, of course, they're doing that. And some of our hotels are also, for example, the Anantara Golden Triangle in Northern Thailand, they're taking the time to focus on CSR efforts. And I think that's something which is potentially a little bit lost in this coronavirus situation. People are so focused on health, sanitation, and survival that I think conservation has perhaps taken a little bit of a backseat from the people or from people's focus on it. Obviously, nature is getting a great rest, but then what afterwards when things come back? We have to maintain and support the initiatives that we've been looking at for years and be able to continue to roll those out. And we've certainly seen that in Thailand and at our camp, where we've taken in an extra elephant, and we're trying to support funds and things for the elephant population in Thailand which is unemployed at the moment. So yes, there's a lot of work going on the properties, and they're also taking this time to be able to upskill, train, and focus on our CSR initiatives.
Very good. Christopher?
I think we've seen it across all regions. We also recently opened 2 hotels. I remember we announced the 2 openings in Japan. So we were able to work through with the local authorities for certain areas, but in places like Indonesia and so on, where we had to stop our work because we simply couldn't get the supplies in to work on that. So with that, we definitely had to stop work on some construction stuff. But for hotels that are closed, where we have our associates still on property, a lot of work has been focused on refreshing the property. This could be done internally, and I think, and also a deep cleaning into some of the areas and so on. It's been an ongoing work for us for the last few weeks, and we've seen some great results from those. And I think the associates too are enjoying it because they're coming together and working towards coming to work, that they're able to get to work and so on. And being at home has been difficult for a lot of them too. So yes, so this is what's been happening with our hotels.
Great. Okay. Are there, in fact, as far as the new security and hygiene regimens that are being put into place, does any of that actually involve physical renovations? Absolutely. Or
absolutely? Yeah, there are a lot more protocols. There are a lot more checks that were in place. Obviously, we've been guided by not just the local authorities, but we have our own standards too, and we had to quickly change a lot of the checking protocols and so on, and fortunately we were able to execute that very quickly and put it in place.
Great. Okay. James, are there any other questions?
Yes, there's 2 more additional questions, okay. Very interesting ones. We have this from Lindsay Grace Kinnebra in Bali. So earlier there was discussion about we're all waiting for flights to come back online to drive tourism. And there's been so many articles about how if we look back, the root cause of this pandemic is essentially humanity's broken relationship with nature and the world. So are topics such as climate change and environmental issues still at the front of our minds for hotels?
Wow. Okay. You each have 30 seconds to answer that question. Mariam, please.
I would hope they are, and I think they need to be. I think we cannot move forward without this being a central focus for any company, any hotel, any individual. We have seen what has happened to us in the last 2 months, and if we don't take care of what we have, I think it could be very detrimental for all of our futures. So perhaps it's a little bit of a wake-up call about treating our Earth and our planet a little bit better.
Well said. Paul?
I'd just say that I think we've all noticed, and there's been lots of things posted online and everywhere about how nicer and cleaner the environment look without lots of tourists, without lots of transport, and without lots of polluting factories. And I think that a lot of us in the industry are going to have to perhaps take that on board and think about, there may well be a call for less tourism in the future, because there's a clear sort of link, if you like, between lots and lots of people moving around the planet and the pollution of the said planet.
Mm-hmm. Christopher, anything to add?
Yeah, I think it has always been on the forefront. To what extent and how we push it really depends on the resources that are available made to us. Something that we've been doing in Indonesia was removing plastic bottles, and we tried to do it in stages, and we're working towards that already. So these are some of the things that we'll continue to push through. But I do think that from where we see, how we see things and how we protect the environment, I think it's going to be totally elevated. We definitely need to work together with not just within our industry. We have to work with the partners in that destination to ensure that we look at it holistically and not just from a hotel point of view.
Yeah, holistically, yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, James, I guess we have time for one last question. So,
final question we have is from Mafalda Costa Tavares from Ritz-Carlton Reserve, Fulay Bay. So her question is as follows. So it's all speculation at this point, but when do you all foresee long-haul markets such as the US or Europe traveling back to Asia? Do you think it's possible in the first quarter of 2021, or will it take longer than that?
So that's inbound from Europe and North America?
North America to Asia, yeah.
It's the big question. Marion.
Q1 2021, so January to March. I think we would all wish for that, but I think it's probably a little premature. I think we will really have to focus on the local and regional markets for now, and I think it will be later in 2021 before we see long-haul markets returning.
Okay, later in 2021.
Yes.
Christopher, does that jive with your expectations?
Yeah, it's pretty much aligned with what Marion has said. Hi, Mafalda. And definitely where we see, and I think what we need to see, although we're working closely with all our partners, initially they were a little optimistic and they were saying, oh, they're going to be back early this year and so on. But on hindsight, looking what's happening in that part of the world right now, I think it's going to take a while. We will see small pockets of it, but we're not going to see it returning to what it was before, not even until, yeah, late next year.
Late next year. Okay. Good. Well, I think that's just about all the time we have now. Ronald, did you want to add any closing thoughts?
No, there was no more questions, James, from your side. There are a few, but I think we've answered the more pertinent ones. I think. Okay. Well, like I said before earlier in the beginning, I think I mean coming through these turbulent times, I think the one way of coming stronger is when we work together. I think that's why I think what I heard about this in alliance in Hong Kong, I think the hoteliers have they're thinking the same thing as well. So I think we need to do more of that, within our industry, more partnership, collaboration. So yeah, I'd like to see more of that actually, more news from that angle coming out. So, thank you.
Very good.
There's one last question, I think, if it's possible. This just came in. So we have a question, Jessica Schwartzy from AEG Software Company. She wants to ask about cancellation policies. Will they be different for mice or larger groups in case there's a second wave of the pandemic? I mean, this is a worst case scenario. How are hotels prepared for that?
Mice.
Interesting.
It's a nice question. She's a
Mice is big. Marian, any thoughts quickly?
Okay, I think for mice groups, things are still evolving, and I think it's going to take time for the mice business to take off again. So I think right now it's, you know, reconnecting with all of those businesses and those groups and being able to customize and curate for them based on their requirements. So I think everything's on the table at this point in time, and everyone is looking to, as Ronald said, work together. So I think everyone will be flexible to see how we can support each other moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Anyone else?
Merit takes the same view too. We are extremely flexible right now with groups and so on, and continue to work with our customers in that way and ensure that, you know, they feel that they are assured of being protected and safe.
Okay.
I'd just add a thought that I think flexibility across all of the sectors of the travel industry is key at this time, because with so much uncertainty, no one is going to start making commitments for booking ahead for flights, hotels, cruise lines, whatever, when they don't know absolutely what the lay of the land will be at the time when they want to go ahead with it. So unless there is flexibility, I just don't think people will start booking again.
Right. Okay. Well, that sounds like a very good piece of wisdom to end on. So thank you everyone for joining today, the panelists and the audience. Much appreciated. Again, apologies for my late and unglamorous arrival on the scene and the disaster that is my homemade green screen. Next time it'll be beautiful, and there will be a next time. This is of course the first in a series of destination roundtables that we're planning to roll out. So we'll be alerting everyone soon as to the topic and date of the next one. So please come join us again. And until then, stay safe. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.